They say, I can't run again. That's the expression. Sure. Then somebody said, I don't think you can. Oh.
Those were comments Donald Trump made at the National Prayer Breakfast, where he once again floated the idea of staying in power beyond what is allowed by the 22nd Amendment. So to say that he has no regard for the Constitution would be an understatement. He also tried to end birthright citizenship via executive order, which is codified in the 14th Amendment. He is considering sending incarcerated U.S. citizens to El Salvadoran prisons in direct violation of the 8th Amendment. He's sending immigrants to concentration camps as we speak in Gitmo to deprive them of their 5th Amendment rights, which everybody is entitled to, by the way, regardless of citizenship status. His Attorney General, Pam Bondi, is criminally investigating companies that have DEI initiatives, which is a brazen violation of the First Amendment. And he's reportedly drafting an executive order to abolish or dismantle, we don't know how far it's going to go, the Department of Education, which requires an act of Congress. Now, on top of that, he's letting Elon Musk illegally gain access to our government agencies, which now includes the NIH, the Department of Education, and probably more as I record this. He's also gained access to Medicaid and Medicare computers. He is trying to line item veto payments appropriated by Congress at the U.S. Treasury. And that's obviously illegal, but what's crazy, or not so crazy, depending on, what you know about politics, is that Republican senators have willingly ceded that power to Elon Musk despite its illegality. And as this Notice headline put it, Musk's actions may be unconstitutional, but, quote, nobody should bellyache about that, Senator Tom Tillis said. Right. So in other words, this is a constitutional crisis, and nobody's acting like it. But even that doesn't sufficiently describe the danger of this moment, and I think that Jamelle Bouie put it best, writing for the New York Times, quote, to describe the current situation in the executive branch as merely a constitutional crisis is to understate the significance of what we're experiencing. Constitutional crisis does not even begin to capture the radicalism of what is unfolding in the federal bureaucracy and of what Congress's decision to not act may liquidate in terms of constitutional meaning. Together, Trump and Musk are trying to rewrite the rules of the American system. They are trying to instantiate an anti-constitutional theory of executive power that would make the president supreme over all other branches of government. If Trump, Musk, and their allies succeed, then the question of American politics won't be if they'll win the next election, but whether the Constitution as we know it is still in effect. And that's what we're contending with right now, in this moment. Donald Trump is in the process of fundamentally transforming our entire system of governance and consolidating power so rapidly that there might not actually be any going back when it's all said and done. We're talking about an informal dictatorship or an explicitly illiberal system of governance, if not de facto regime change altogether. And it doesn't take long to dismantle democratic institutions. In a piece published in The Atlantic by historian Timothy Ryback, he describes how Hitler was able to do it in just 53 days. And the parallels between then and now are truly striking. But we're going to revisit that article in a bit. The point is that it's not too early to start having serious conversations about contingency plans if Trump chooses to go full Hitler. Senator Chris Murphy urged Democrats to act like democracy is weeks away from disintegrating, because it is. And given the speed with which Trump is moving, I'm afraid he could be right. And on a recent episode of Secular Talk, Kyle Kulinski encouraged Democrats to take some pretty extreme steps, admittedly, but they're necessary.
I really hope the Democrats are smart enough right now to be making alliances which might be necessary for the future. And what I mean by that is you got to get the National Guard on your side. You got to get police departments on your side. You got to try to peel away some generals from the Trump administration, because the fact of the matter is, what is stopping these guys? What's stopping Elon and what's stopping Trump from... The courts are going to say, and this isn't a maybe they'll say this, they are definitely going to say, Elon's got to stop. They got to stop. What's to stop them from Trump to come out and say, no, I disagree. I want to keep going. I'm the president. My word stands. That's beyond a constitutional crisis. That is literally just a fascist coup. That's what that is. Where it's like, hey, you can't do this. This is in brazen, flagrant contravention of the law. And they go, agree to disagree. What do you do then? What do you do then? If you are not making alliances with muscle right now, and all the muscle is on the side of Trump and Elon, then they literally get to do whatever they want. The law is whatever the fuck they say it is at that point. I mean, these are literally the conversations we have to start having.
And I totally agree. With everything that we've already seen, it's not too early to start having that conversation. And I would rather over-prepare than be under-prepared. And the reason why Democrats should prepare for that scenario is because the judiciary, which is still a check on Trump to an extent at least, doesn't have a way to enforce their decisions. So while Congress won't hold him accountable, well, the judiciary might, but they don't have a police force, right? They simply interpret the Constitution and they say what is or isn't permissible. So if they say that Trump can't send U.S. citizens to El Salvador, for example, he can technically just do it anyway, and they'd have no way to enforce their decision. There's no way to stop him, essentially. They can't arrest him, and the Supreme Court already granted him near absolute immunity, so Trump could just threaten to ignore the Constitution and then ignore the Constitution, and absolutely nothing could be done about it. And we're clearly building towards that moment. And Republicans also know that it's getting to that point because they're feeling pressure to let us know that this isn't what it looks like. For example, Senator Mike Lee asked, name a fascist dictator whose agenda entailed limiting the size, cost, and power of government. I can name one. Hitler. The Adolf Hitler. And one of the more popular replies to that by SDL pointed out this excerpt from Jamelle, who explained how the Nazis pursued privatization to win over support from big industries and business leaders. In other words, they outsourced public services to private industries. And that is exactly what Trump is doing. In fact, he already won over the business industry, right? I mean, the Broligarchs showed up to his inauguration, the richest people in the world, with an estimated net worth of nearly $1 trillion, were sitting shoulder to shoulder at his inauguration. And this notion that Trump is limiting the size of government because of some ideological commitment to anarcho-capitalism or something is bullshit, and Mike Lee knows it's bullshit. Trump is specifically hollowing out the administrative state in order to consolidate his own power and eliminate checks and balances. That's the extent to which he's committed to shrinking government. He wants the government to be so small that he is effectively the government. And he has the first and last say on everything because he is a fascist who aspires to be a dictator, and Mike Lee knows it, which is why he felt like he needed to address that, because it is exactly what it looks like. And it's easy to be alarmed by the most blatant things that he's doing that's driving the constitutional crisis that we're in. But him and his cronies are also making other more subtle changes that are either dubious in their illegality, disastrous, or just straight up Hitlerian, literally. Case in point.
The governor of New Jersey, Phil Murphy, basically admitted that he knew somebody that didn't have full documentation, that he was hiding over his garage. Then we have Tom Tillis, senator from North Carolina, saying that people should have the right to sue sanctuary cities and states that aid and abet in lawbreaking. Your comment on all of that?
Well, I think the government's pretty foolish saying what he said, because I got note of it, won't let it go, we'll look into it. And if he's knowingly harboring, concealing an illegal alien, that's a violation of Title 8 United States Code 1324. I would seek prosecution, or the secretary would seek prosecution.
Just to be clear, Tom Homan, Donald Trump's border czar, is threatening to prosecute and arrest a governor for harboring and concealing immigrants. I mean, the Hitler particles are through the roof. This is straight up Nazi shit. And on that note, look at what one of Trump's State Department appointees tweeted back in October. Quote, competent white men must be in charge if you want things to work. Yeah. And to make matters worse, Trump is literally in the process of making that a reality right now. He rescinded an executive order signed by Lyndon Johnson in the civil rights era. He recently forced NASA to purge any mention of women in leadership from their websites. So, I mean, he is in the process of making sure white men are the ones in charge, as if they already weren't. Look at the makeup of Congress. But to be crystal clear, when he says competent white man, it's redundant to them because it's assumed that they're automatically competent due to their whiteness. And just to go back to Pam Bondi's criminal investigation of companies with DEI, Gabrielle Perry put into perspective what that could actually look like in practice. Quote, this is the return of Jim Crow. My mentor at work texted me before I could even process the news myself. My boss keeps saying to be calm. I can't believe anyone would think this is not going to lead to companies not hiring marginalized people and women. That's exactly it. They are trying to discourage companies from diversifying their workforces under the pretense of eliminating DEI. So we are getting a much better sense of what Trump meant when he said he wanted to make America great again. You know, people often responded by asking, well, when was America great and what era do you specifically want to return to? And the answer apparently is somewhere between the 1930s and before the civil rights movement. And speaking of going back in time, the CDC's contraception page has officially gone dark, which may be an ominous sign of what's to come. And I say that because almost everything Trump is doing was outlined in Project 2025. And Brendan Carr, who is an author of Project 2025 that Trump appointed as FCC chair, outlined what he's doing to crack down on critics of Donald Trump, which is something that was, again, outlined in Project 2025.
You know, look, there's a lot of people in this country right now on the radical left that are upset about this investigation into CBS and the work that I'm doing on broadcasters. And sort of paraphrase Thomas Sowell, when the government has been weaponized in your favor, it feels like discrimination when all of a sudden there's even-handed treatment.
I've got to say, him using a Thomas Sowell quote in that context is genuinely disgusting, because he's referring to his agency's frivolous investigation into 60 Minutes because they did an interview with Kamala Harris and edited it down. And he claims that the agency was weaponized against Fox News, therefore it's justified for them to do the same since the precedent was already set by the last chair of the FCC, except he's not telling you that Fox News was punished for breaking the law by platforming defamatory claims about the 2020 election being stolen, whereas 60 Minutes cut out portions of Kamala's interview to save time, which is a very common practice in all of media. But this is what they do. They lie about something that's happening, or they exaggerate to give themselves a justification to later do it themselves. Conservatives were being censored on social media. Well, look at that. All of a sudden, now there's mass censorship, albeit on the left. Well, the election was rigged by Democrats. Well, I guess that means we have to engage in voter suppression in order to stop their rigging. But I mean, with respect to the FCC, the goal is to send a message to every single media company in the country that if you criticize Donald Trump, we will come after you. It's explicitly authoritarian and has a chilling effect on free speech. But that's the point. A wannabe dictator's consolidation of power necessitates a crackdown on political opponents. It is what Hitler did, albeit to a much more severe extent. But nonetheless, Trump is doing that. This is the beginning. And on the subject of Hitler, terrible segue, I know, but on that subject, I do want to circle back to that piece from The Atlantic, because when you look at the similarities between then and now, it really puts into perspective how dire the situation is. Here's some key similarities. Quote, Hitler believed that an empowering law was crucial to his political survival, but passing such a law, which would dismantle the separation of powers, grant Hitler's executive branch the authority to make laws without parliamentary approval, and allow Hitler to rule by decree, bypassing democratic institutions and the Constitution, required the support of a two-thirds majority in the fractious Reichstag. But that agenda was thwarted, so in a meeting with cabinet officials, the following happened. Hitler opened the meeting by boasting that millions of Germans had welcomed his chancellorship with jubilation, then outlined his plans for expunging key government officials and filling their positions with loyalists. Sound familiar? Trump also talks about having a mandate, and he's doing that. At this point, he turned to his main agenda item, the empowering law that he argued would give him the time, 4 years according to the stipulations laid out in the draft of the law, and the authority necessary to make good on his campaign promises to revive the economy, reduce unemployment, increase military spending, withdraw from international treaty obligations, sound familiar, purge the country of foreigners, sound familiar, he claimed were, quote, poisoning the blood of the nation, and exact revenge on political opponents. Heads will roll in the sand, Hitler had vowed at one rally. Moving on, he wanted to purge communists from government, but he worried about whether or not they would launch a national strike that would cripple the economy, to which he, quote, wondered whether the army could be used to crush any public unrest. But it was ultimately dismissed by his defense minister because he couldn't imagine a situation where Hitler would be able to direct the German military to shoot down protesters in the streets. Hitler had campaigned on the promise of draining the parliamentarian swamp, only to find himself now floundering in a quagmire of partisan politics and banging up against constitutional guardrails. He responded as he invariably did when confronted with dissenting opinions or inconvenient truths. He ignored them and doubled down. Now, that's where we're going to stop, but I will link you to the full story down below if you want to find out what happens next. But spoiler alert, Hitler did end up breaking democracy entirely fairly quickly. And then he went on to do a Holocaust. And where we stopped reading is about where we're at now in history, just in our own version of that story, where Trump is in the process of dismantling the administrative state and purging government of anyone who isn't loyal to him. Also, Hitler, like Trump, wanted to conduct mass deportations And Hitler said that Jewish immigrants were poisoning the blood of the nation. And Trump quoted Hitler on the campaign trail and said that same thing verbatim. Hitler, like Trump, couldn't do everything that he wanted to do right away because of democratic checks and balances. So to get around that, he systematically dismantled them and characterized that effort as draining the parliamentarian swamp. Sound familiar? Hitler also went after political opponents. Trump wants to do the same. I mean, Trump talked about wanting to crush dissent using the military. He talked about going after the enemy within on the campaign trail. And as you saw from that article, Hitler wanted to do the same thing. Trump's defense secretary, unlike Hitler's, who was just confirmed, by the way, wouldn't say whether or not he'd order the military to go after U.S. citizens if Trump asked him to. So the parallels are very chilling, and this is a really dangerous moment. And I'm not saying that Donald Trump will definitely go as far as Hitler did, but what I am saying is that we should treat this moment as if he will, because we can't afford not to. So no, you're not being hysterical by thinking about this. Don't let the fascists gaslight you into thinking that this is all normal, because it's not normal. And they know that it's not normal, hence why they're trying to convince us that it's not what it looks like. That's why Mike Lee made that tweet, because it looks really bad, because it is. You're not being unreasonable. In fact, it's unreasonable for your hair to not be on fire in this moment because it's bad. We are in the process of transitioning into an autocracy, and we don't know where we're ultimately going to end up. Maybe we land on illiberalism, or end up in a soft dictatorship, or we go full-blown totalitarian. We don't know, but it's clear we're sliding further and further along that scale, and we'd be foolish to not prepare for the absolute worst.
Do yourself a favor and click the join button on YouTube to become a member. Because Mike's doing a great job getting to watch his videos before everyone else is tremendous. Many people are saying this. Join today, folks. You won't regret it.